Hey everybody, I'm Mark Walters of BigFanboy.com, and I'm sitting here with Rob Minkoff. Did I say your last name is Minkoff? That's
Yes.
how I say it? Okay. Director of Mr. Peabody Sherman. First of all, I love your past work as well. I mean, I really enjoyed this film, but you've done some really great movies. I mean, things like The Lion King. You've also worked on films as an animator as well.
Sure.
So I wanted to talk first and foremost about, having sort of that past experience working for like Disney and, what all of that was able to sort of teach you to become an animator director.
Sure.
And what specifically maybe that helped bring to this project.
Sure. Well, I was so fortunate to be able to work at Disney when I did. Obviously, it was a great time to work there. I was very excited to be, working with this kind of a small group of people who were all, really excited about animation and really wanting to kind of bring it back, as an art form. And, working on things like The Little Mermaid or Beauty and the Beast, and then ultimately directing Lion King was kind of an amazing thing. And for me, it was really a dream come true, because when I was a kid, I loved Disney movies and really sort of wanted to work there. So it was fantastic.
Yeah, and then when you're doing something like this, I mean, you're modernizing like kind of a classic thing that we all remember, but taking it in a new and different direction. And I was honestly, I'm amazed that you guys were able to take something like that and make it so fresh and so topical, and not feel like it's somehow changed in the wrong way.
Right.
It feels like just right.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That was very much what we were hoping to do, because I grew up being a big fan of Mr. Peabody and Sherman, and so when the idea about making it into a movie came up, it was sort of like, how do you do that? How do you take a Mr. Peabody and Sherman, which exists as a 4.5-minute short, and make it into a feature film? And the thing that we knew right away was we had to be true to the characters. We had to make sure Mr. Peabody was the Mr. Peabody we remembered, even though he might not look exactly the same and doesn't sound exactly the same, but still there's something kind of essentially the same character. So that, now I kind of liken it to a Sherlock Holmes, in the sense that we've seen many, many actors play that role over the years. Many have done an incredible job, and yet it's always Sherlock Holmes. We always know who that character is. So for me, Peabody was as strong a character in a kind of a classic sense. So that was sort of the most important thing to do. And then I think the way we managed to update it was simply to imagine what it would be like today. Meaning, rather than change Mr. Peabody or who he was at all, we just sort of said the world has changed a little bit, and maybe we should just see how that would affect things. So, it was possible to look at it, just slightly through a different lens, but to make it modern in that way.
There's a very sort of, for lack of a better word, Spielbergian quality to the film. It kind of made me think, I mean, I was a child of the 80s, and so growing up in the 80s and watching films, and there was a sense of wonderment that I think's been lost in a lot of movies recently. And I felt like you really recaptured that with this movie, like a lot of the time travel aspects and maybe just sort of the interactions between people, the father and son relationship. It kind of took me back to a better day of movies.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. I'm a big fan of Mr.
Well, and also when you're working with time travel, there's always sort of a lot of those questions and everything. And I think the way you guys handled it was fun, because it was sort of throwing a lot of those conventions out the door, but at the same time, like, being respectful of the period.
Sure.
And
it was actually, I mean, we went through lots and lots and lots of discussion about the time travel and what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. We even hired somebody who actually came in and was a consultant for us, who was literally a physicist. Mm-hmm. And we got a great lesson about time travel in science fiction, because there are a number of different theories that have been used in films like Back to the Future or Terminator 2. And so it was kind of fascinating. We tried different, sort of to apply different theories to it, and had a lot of fun with it. But ultimately, it had to land in the realm of fun. That was sort of the most important thing.
Well, and I respected the fact, too, that I mean, obviously when you go to a movie like this, there's going to be a lot of parents taking their kids.
Sure.
So there's also a lot of, and I hate using the word adult humor, because it insinuates that it's, R-rated humor.
Oh, right.
But smarter, like, mature humor,
right.
I think. And I think that's one of the things that's great is, even if the kids don't necessarily get it, the adults will be laughing along with the kids on this.
100%. Well, that's actually, I think, what makes Jay Ward's work notable,
Mm-hmm.
Is that there are jokes and references to things that no kid would ever know, and I didn't know when I first saw them, and as time went on and I grew up and checked back with some of those shows, it was always like, whoa, that's cool, like, now get that joke or get that reference. And that was really one of the fun things about Bullwinkle and Mr. Peabody and Sherman and Jay Ward in general. And so we sort of wanted to kind of capture that as well. So we sort of thought, well, we can have an Oedipus joke in the movie, and maybe kids aren't going to understand.
We'll just throw Bill Clinton in there.
Throw Bill in there, and it's going to exactly. So it actually made it a lot of fun.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about assembling that voice cast? It's a wonderful mix of talent, and really an inspired mix of talent. Like there's certain people that you wouldn't expect to hear in a movie like this.
Well, we approached it sort of one at a time. Mr. Peabody was the first character that we had to figure out, and went through lists of people who would be right for the role, and then ultimately hit on the idea of Ty Burrell. But at the time, he was just starting in Modern Family, so it wasn't as big a hit as it's become since then. And so we met with him, and he actually came into audition, which is unusual for a big actor. If you're a big star, you're not likely to want to come in an audition. And so what you end up having to do is sort of use what they've done in the past and imagine what they might be doing in this. But Ty was willing to actually come in and work with us. And it was interesting because we played it for Tiffany Ward, who's Jay Ward's daughter, who's sort of been the custodian of all of these properties for such a long time. And when she heard it, she was like, I don't think that's Peabody enough. I think that it's, she had in mind that we would get somebody who sounded exactly like Bill Scott, who was the original voice, but I've never liked sound-alikes in animation. When Mel Blanc doesn't do Bugs Bunny, it always bugs me because I know it's not Mel Blanc. When Kermit the Frog isn't Jim Henson, it's like, I know it's not Jim Henson. So I didn't really want to do a sound-alike because I would always be like somebody trying to do a version of something and not really making it as strong as that. And again, with the Holmes parallel, having another actor play the role makes sense. He can have a slightly different interpretation, but the character will be the same as long as we get it right. So that was ultimately really important. And then all the way down the list, every character that you approach, you sort of say, who's the character, who's right for the role, who will work, who's funny, and I think we got lucky certainly with a great cast.
Yeah, and might I say a phenomenal score by Danny Elfman, which doesn't feel like a Danny Elfman score. It's very sort of, again, kind of a nice sort of throwback to like the big blockbuster films of like the 80s. It has that nostalgic feel to it, and doesn't sound like Elfman.
Well, it's interesting. Obviously, when we think of Danny Elfman, we think of Tim Burton, certainly, and all the sort of more dark films. But he's got a pretty diverse, resume. If you look at some of the films that he's done, some are very surprising and don't sound anything like Danny Elfman films. So, he's, I think, a fan of a lot of different kinds of movies. And when we first got together, he had actually written music, some of which actually did sound a little bit more typical of Danny Elfman. And I sort of didn't want to make that mistake either. Sort of like, well, I don't want it to sound like we're making a Tim Burton movie, which we're not. So, it should have its own identity. And so I think that what we're trying to do, obviously, is tell this story as good as we could and have the music sort of support it.
Yeah, coming from a background that you have, working on both animated films and then also directing live action films, what do you think are some of the nicest advantages of being able to do a movie like this? I mean, obviously with live action, there's a lot of things you got to juggle, egos and other things that are involved with that. But is it more rewarding in some sense to do animated?
Well, I think that the big difference is in the development process. In live action, it's obviously very important to get the script right, or as right as it can possibly be before you start shooting. Frequently, you go into a movie shoot without the script being exactly right, and it is Herculean. It is a monumental task to try to fix a script while you're shooting. And trust me, I know how difficult it is because I've had to do it, and sometimes not successfully. But in an animated movie, the great thing is you're developing the movie in an entirely different way because you're storyboarding the movie based on the script. And in that storyboarding process, you really start to see it come to life, and you can make decisions about it and mold it and change it in that process before you ever have to produce it. And so as you put the story reel together and then you screen the whole movie, you really get a chance to interact with the material, with the story, and the storytelling in a way that you can't really do in live action, because it becomes more seamless, and you can actually continue doing that throughout most of the production as well. So you really have a chance to kind of craft things more so in an animated movie than you can do in a live action movie.
When you're working for DreamWorks, I don't know that I've ever seen a DreamWorks animated film that I didn't like. It seems like they have a really nice high mark of quality that they try to maintain. How much freedom do they give you as opposed to a company like Disney? I would imagine Disney's probably looking over your shoulder a lot more, but DreamWorks, are they more kind of free to let you do your own thing?
first of all, there's always a collaboration. There's always people involved that are working and are representing the studio. So the two primary people that we were working with were Bill Damashki, who's sort of the head of creative at DreamWorks, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, who runs the studio.
Mm-hmm.
And because of my past relationship with Jeffrey, I think I actually had a great deal of freedom because I think there's a trust that's been built up over 25 years.
Yeah.
And so it actually makes it a very good process. But what we generally look for from that participation is a fresh pair of eyes, because when you spend every day and every minute and every hour eating, breathing, and sleeping a movie, and then you suddenly you have it there for the first time and you show it to people, you really want feedback to let you know how on track you are with things and to get a good sense of where the audience is at. And that's generally what you get from that collaboration. It's not so much they say do this or do that, but typically they'll say this didn't work, or this wasn't funny, or this doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. Those are the kind of feedback you get, which is terribly helpful when you're making a movie.
Yeah. What's up next for you?
Well,
take a little time off.
Take a little time off. I have a 1.5-year-old son, so I'll be spending some time with the family.
Congratulations on that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. That's great. Well, thank you. It's a wonderful film. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to whatever you have coming up in the future. I hope you do more of these.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thanks,
Thank you.